Okay, well, I have watched it, and I will give my input. I have watched the live action Snow White. And you know what? Honestly, it's a movie. I know it's not the best review, but still. It is a movie. It is based. Notice it's not copied, it's based off of Disney's Snow White fairy tale, which in turn is based rather loosely off of the actual Snow White fairy tale. But for what this live action movie is, it worked. Now let's talk about the things that are controversial in it. The actor choices kind of speaks for itself. They wanted a very beautiful woman, and they got a beautiful woman. They probably could have done without it being a musical, but may not be the best of actors, but they did their parts. As for Snow White, the title, we're all used to the skin as white as snow, hair as black as uh, wood, and, lips as red as blood. Well, they corrected that in this script. They did not follow that specific direction. They called her Snow White because she was born during a snowstorm. Nothing to do with skin color. The fact that she survived a snowstorm being born. And they made that a major plot point in this movie. That she fought her way through a blizzard to be born. Evil Queen? Yeah. Gal Gadot did that. Staring in a mirror, overacting. Yeah, that happened. Not needing to be rescued by the prince. Yeah, well, she's not the first fairy tale heroine to do that, nor will she ever be the last. The dwarves, another major controversy to this. They were not trying to cast little people as dwarves. They were casting dwarves as dwarves. The semi magical little guys. They even pointed out a scene where they had magic. And the very first scene, they're in the mines. What's the whole glowing hand thing? To track where ore mains are? To find out where the diamonds are? That goes with fairy tale lore. Admittedly, it's not in any version of the Snow White stories, but it makes them fantastical creatures as opposed to just being short humans, which they weren't meant to be, and which is why I guess they made a casting choice not to cast short humans. They cast humanoid creatures, even as CGI animation. So they're dwarfs. It has nothing to do with being humans. They're dwarves. Not in dwarves, they're dwarfs. And in that, they cast them based on the appearances of the Disney characters from the cartoon. Shouldn't be any problem with that. They're dwarves. They did cast a small human as one of the bandit gang, which is fine. Again, nothing to do with him being a dwarf. They just cast him. Everything else kind of follows the primary stories. Admittedly, I would have to see the dancing to death in the flaming red shoes, but that's not going to show up in a kids movie. I did like the fact that her power was based on her beauty. That is why she was obsessed with it, because her beauty was power. That's why she related herself to gemstones as opposed to flowers. Gemstones are durable. And she saw herself as a gemstone. She ordained herself with gemstones. The blade that she was going to kill with was crystal. And when she lost, she turned to carbon, as if she was a diamond who had lost her composure, which was fine. The going into the mirror, that I rather liked. She spent her life in the mirror, and she spends her death in the mirror. But other than that, and, the singing, the songs are all Disney. That's just a giveaway. That's never going to go away. That's just how Disney is. But that's pretty much all I can say about it. It followed the classic fairy tale points. Not the classic fairy tale, but followed typical fairy tale points. And she didn't have to fight to take the kingdom back. She had to remind them of what it was like before. And that's pretty much it. I admittedly did get bored watching the movie. I had to watch it in 2 days because I was just watching it on Disney Plus in my kitchen while cooking, and, well, first time I just couldn't get into it. Second time I just finished watching where it was, and it hit all of the classic fairy tale points that you'd expect in Snow White. It didn't really do any more, it didn't do any less. I didn't follow the Brothers Grimm version of Snow White, but it followed the Disney Snow White, which, again, is based off of. It's not meant to follow it exactly. They could have done it completely, not even as a Snow White story. Call it the same things, but people who crap on movies just because it doesn't match up to their memory, the movies you watch don't even match up to your memory of them, because you insert yourself and your own memories into different things. As a guy who has read several hundreds of fairy tales, this stands alone as a fairy tale musical, and honestly, it may not be my favorite, but compared to other renditions of Snow White in the past, I would say that this is definitely a Disney Snow White. There was the only death in the entire things were Snow White's parents, and they were off-scene. And see, I could have seen them do it with the king being sent to the Southern Kingdom and actually surviving, or at least being exiled to it, which would have been, another way they could have ended it. But that would have gone against Gal Gadot's evil queen as not being so evil. But the fact that she was a witch and showed it at the very start should have given some inclination to that she was not all a good person. But as I said, this is just my thoughts on it. It's a decent movie for what it is. And it's a rendition of a 200 to 300-year-old fairy tale. But for what it is, they did a decent job. As I said, I can't really say anything negative against it. I'm sure I could, but I'm not a big fan of Disney musicals. I know, that's kind of a shock. But it is a movie. And if you go into it without any expectations, you might enjoy it. Me, I went in with my history of fairy tales, and though it did not follow the Snow White I know, any of the Snow Whites I know, it followed Disney's version, and it enhanced it. I like the fact that they didn't just have some prince wandering around, but actually an everyman instead of a prince. But yeah, I can't really think of anything else to say about this. So, it's up to you whether you like it or not. It's probably not something I would give multiple watches, but I wasn't going to just ignore it existed. So, judge your own opinion on it. Or take mine. You'll do what you do anyway. Watch some movies, read some books. Feel free to compare them. And I'll be here watching, listening, and reading. Until next time.